This happened to me a few years ago. Drones had just started becoming affordable and a lot of people were beginning to buy them. This was the case for me and my dad. We spent about $400 on a decent drone that filmed in HD. Me and my dad hadn't been seen eye to eye after my 30-year-old brother moved back in after a messy divorce, and us all living in a small house was causing tension, especially when his kids were around on weekends, so me and my dad decided to try and bond with a drone. We both had an interest in drones and in flying and thought this would bring us together. We live in a small neighbourhood and there was a large cemetery near where we lived. That's where we decided to go the day we got the drone. Macabre, I know, but me and my pa both grew up with this cemetery, so it wasn't as gloomy as you'd think. Besides, we had spent the first 2 hours retrieving it from neighbours' gardens after it went off whilst we were flying it. From our house, the cemetery for the entire neighbourhood was at the end of our street. It was gated and right at the back was a huge muddy hill. Even in the dry summers, it remained muddy due to the canopy of trees, and then beyond that was a small valley-like thing where an old sewage pipe leaks out. I know, gross. And then there's secluded woodland. Secluded by which I mean no paths or trails, and possibly even private land, but I'm unsure. All of this is important for later. So, the cemetery does have a lot of trees scattered throughout, but nowhere near as many as the woods further on. And there's also, obviously, graves, but there are also some small patches of open grass that have nothing there. There was a small field near the entrance. It was small and secluded, so we decided to go there to try and get used to control sensitivity and the handling of the thing. I crashed it into the ground and a tree trunk, and my dad crashed it into a grave like an idiot. We actually felt really guilty about that and moved a bit further away. My dad continued, trying, in vain, to fly the drone. We kept taking it in turns for about an hour and then, well, my dad fucked up. He was using the drone and kept holding the throttle up. Up, up, up. The drone kept rising and, really quite suddenly, just disappeared over the tree line. Now, the drone had a controller with a screen, but it was just black, suggesting it was either facing down or really close to something, giving us no leads as to its location. I was making a joke of my dad to lighten the mood as we both headed in the direction it drifted off. Now, I better explain the layout of the cemetery here to give you an idea. Over the tree line was a large field, but it was massively overgrown with weeds. It had been neglected for some years and was shoulder height on me. I'm 6 foot tall. Running parallel to that was a path that curved round downhill, then, after the curve, sloped back up and then headed towards the aforementioned trees and the muddy slope. Adjacent to that main path were 2 rather steep, short paths, both with graves either side, neglected, damaged, and knocked over due to safety reasons, and the grass was a tangled mess. On a side note, the cemetery isn't completely neglected. The other half is beautiful and well preserved. I think this part may just be the older part. So, my dad was traipsing through the overgrown field whilst I was walking the gravel paths, looking out for it. He had the controller and held the throttle up periodically so we could maybe hear the whir of the motors. No luck. I decided to continue up the curved path. My dad argued that the drone couldn't have gone that far away as it was flying at about a 90-degree angle to the way I was heading. I told him to go looking that way and I'd continue in case the wind picked it up. He agreed. I was walking uphill now, keeping my eyes peeled. My dad had kept the controller, so I was going off of sight and hoped my dad was still in range if I passed it by. I was now following the path back on itself, walking parallel now to the mud hill, separated by a stretch of grass and graves, about 3 car lengths wide. I was under a huge row of trees as I was as near to the wooded area as could be, and it was dark. Even for being undercover, It was unnaturally so. I was walking on the gravel and suddenly had the urge to stop. And I realised it was silent. A thick, moody cloud hung over me as I suddenly felt tired and sad. Before, all the birds were chirping and flies and insects could be seen in the air and on all the plants. Now, I was looking out on a bleak landscape. That's when I heard it. A long, thunderous, droning sound. It shook the tree branches and the leaves rustled. It was real. It's really hard to describe an unidentified sound, but I'll give it a go. It sounded like a massive horn, both from the sky and from the very ground. It shook my entire body and even left me dizzy. It sounded like a ship horn bellowing through the skies. To say it was unnerving was an understatement. I looked around after it stopped. I swear it had gone even darker. I looked to the skies, through the canopy, and there was nothing there. It seemed a natural darkness. Then I heard rustling. I looked to the tree line near the mud hill, and between the graves, bushes, and tree trunks, I saw these figures. They were completely black and featureless and were what I can only describe as abstract humanoid. They were tall, thin, and looked fluid and had 2 dots which were a pale white where eyes would have been. There was easily 24 of them, all different shapes and sizes across the tree line. I was struggling to distinguish them from the background, and they started becoming more animated, moving faster and all whispering in one unintelligible hum. It was growing louder and louder and sounded like it was in my head. I felt threatened and scared. I felt these things were not friendly. I clamped both hands over my ears, but it didn't stop. It became louder, almost to a shout. I dropped to my knees and screamed and then started crying. A 22-year-old man, just crying in the middle of a path. The whispering stopped and I looked towards the trees. They had all disappeared. I ran back the way I came to find my dad. Sunlight and birds were accepted with grace as I bolted over to him. He asked me what was the matter and I didn't hesitate to tell him everything. Naturally, he didn't believe me as I struggled to believe myself, and I was the one who saw it. My dad suggested we go back and I declined. After a talk with him, I opted to follow close behind my dad. It unnerved him to see me visibly shaking and truly terrified as we approached the muddy hill. That's when my dad spotted it, hanging from a low branch from one of the trees, right where I had been looking minutes ago, was the drone. It wasn't a small thing either, and it was white. How could I have missed it? As we walked over towards the mud hill, I realised something else. If it had been people, there's no way they could have stood and moved as fast as they did where I saw the entities. A chill ran through me as this thought occurred. We returned home and I hoped to God the drone caught the noises, the boom from the sky, or the whispers. It hadn't, nor had it been moved other than when the branches shook from the sound, meaning it was there the whole time I was. It did, however, pick up the silence for a few minutes, which isn't exactly proof, and then you hear my scream. I've been open about this to friends, and theories have led from time slips to aliens, government testing near my town, and even spirits linking to the grave my dad hit with the drone, or the graves I stood on whilst looking for it. I've had people ask if I was drunk, on any meds, or have any mental issues, and I'm telling you all now that I don't. I'm still yet to be able to explain what happened to me, but I never go to that corner of the cemetery alone and avoid it at all costs, if possible. I'd greatly appreciate if you guys have any ideas of what it could be, to leave some suggestions. Thanks in advance. I was walking in the hills of Derbyshire in the UK with my border collie about 3 months ago at the start of 2018. I live in the city and work as a teaching assistant at a primary school. I love nature and the outdoors, and my dog, Kyoto, is very demanding and is always ready for a walk. I often drive up to the hills, Peak District, Goit Valley, or some of the reservoirs nearby. It was a Saturday and it was an impeccable day. The sun beat down, but a cool breeze carried in the air, taking the edge off the warmth of the day. The clear skies are important for the story later on. I'm walking up a small peak I don't know the name of, assuming it even has one, my dog bounding close by, sniffing and exploring the areas behind and ahead of me on the trail. We passed a fair few other people and joined the good bout of weekend weather, dog walkers, families, picnickers and other serious hikers. We reached the summit of the peak, which was quite flat, and settled down on a nice looking patch of grass so I could have a sandwich and some tea I had brought in a thermos, and so Kyoto could have some water and a few biscuits. I seemed to be the only person on the peak at this point, other than a gentleman way across the other side who appeared to be bird watching. He had binoculars and a notebook, and was taking notes every so often. I was lay on my back and looked up at the sky. It was clear, no clouds, no chemtrails, no birds, nothing. I can't stress that enough. I had lay there for a couple of minutes when Kyoto began whimpering and erratically looking across the sky. I sat up and looked too. To me, it was still devoid of anything. I tried comforting her when I found myself overcome with an uneasy feeling. I looked over to the birdwatcher whom, too, seemed to have abandoned his birdwatching and was now nervously glancing around the peak. I jumped as this earth-shaking noise came down from the heavens. I don't mean earth-shaking as a descriptive device. The noise literally shook the ground I stood on, nearly making me topple, like an earthquake. It sounded like a foghorn from an old ship, or how I imagined Gabriel's horn would sound on Judgment Day. I looked to the skies. They were still clear. The sound seemed out of place as it exploded a second time. I pushed my fingers into my ears, following suit of the birdwatcher. Seeing him like that, well, I knew it wasn't in my head. It sounded a third and final time. It's difficult to sum up the beauty of the sound, but its overall dominance and tone was that of horror and darkness. All went silent and the sounds settled back to normal, bar any sound of any living creature. The light breeze wafted through the trees and the horn-like sound was nothing more than tinnitus in my ears. I made eye contact with the birdwatcher and began marching over to him, hoping to discuss what had happened. Weirdly, as he saw me making my way towards him, he ran away. A relaxed-looking, at least 70-year-old birdwatcher just sprinted downhill away from me. I never caught him, nor have I ever been able to identify him. There was nothing in the papers or on the news about this, and to be honest, I personally left it unreported, due to the judgment I believed I'd received for experiencing something that could be deemed as silly. I'm aroused by the prospect of it being extraterrestrials, though I feel I can dismiss this due to the clear skies. But that only leaves the question: what was that noise? Hey guys, Brothers Jackson here. As usual, I really hope you enjoyed that video. Don't forget to give it a like, don't forget to comment, and don't forget to subscribe for more. Hit that bell notification when you subscribe to be notified when I get a new video, because YouTube has messed about with the algorithm again from what I can gather off other YouTubers. So if you want to see my videos first, hit that bell notification. Thank you so much for watching all the time, guys. Peace.